Good evening. Tonight, we're diving into the story of how the Trump administration's tariffs reshaped the American economy. Tariffs were imposed on goods from China, Europe, and others, sparking a wave of retaliatory tariffs on American products. The goal: protect U.S. industries and jobs. But who really paid the price? To answer that, we'll break down the top 10 states hit hardest by the trade war. From the soybean fields of the Midwest to the tech hubs of the West Coast, we'll see how policy became personal. Let's get to the big board and start with number 10. First up, Nebraska, the Cornhusker state, where agriculture is everything. Nebraska is a powerhouse in beef and soybeans, both lifelines for thousands of families. The trade war, especially with China, put Nebraska's farmers in crisis. When China imposed tariffs, demand for Nebraska soybeans collapsed overnight. Prices dropped, costs stayed high, and many family farms faced bankruptcy. Beef producers weren't spared either. Tariffs and trade uncertainty hit exports to key markets like Mexico and Canada. Farmers operate on thin margins and long timelines. Sudden changes in trade policy created risks they couldn't manage. Grain elevators overflowed, and multi-generational farms teetered on the edge. For Nebraska, tariffs weren't just policy, they were a direct threat to livelihoods. The state lost hundreds of millions, a stark lesson in global interdependence. Nebraska lands at number 10 for the concentrated hit on its most vital sector. The economic pain was real, reshaping communities across the state. Let's move to number 9. Number 9, North Carolina, where a diverse economy faced multiple pressure points. Tobacco, once a cornerstone crop, lost its biggest customer when China imposed tariffs, devastating for farmers and their heritage. The pork industry, another giant, was hammered as China and Mexico slapped tariffs on American pork, sending prices plummeting. The shockwaves hit not just farms but processing plants and supply chains, threatening jobs statewide. Manufacturing also took a hit. Tariffs on steel and aluminum raised costs for North Carolina's factories, making their products less competitive. Companies faced tough choices: absorb higher costs, raise prices, or cut jobs. The result? Economic uncertainty rippled from rural fields to urban factory floors. North Carolina's story is one of broad, unintended consequences. Tariffs meant to help some industries ended up hurting many more. At number 9, it's a clear example of how trade wars can disrupt a state's entire economic fabric. From tobacco fields to factory floors, the pain was widespread. Let's see who's next on the list. Number 8, Pennsylvania, the Steel City's double-edged sword. Pennsylvania number 8 was at the heart of the steel tariff debate. The promise: revive American steel. The reality: a divided economy. While steel producers saw some benefit, the state's many manufacturers, who rely on steel and aluminum, faced soaring costs. Companies making machinery, canned goods, and more had to choose between shrinking profits or raising prices. Many delayed expansion, cut hiring, or considered moving operations. Meanwhile, Pennsylvania's farmers were hit by retaliatory tariffs on dairy, pork, and even whiskey. The result: a state caught between competing interests with widespread collateral damage. The steel tariffs created as many losers as winners, and the agricultural sector suffered too. Pennsylvania's experience shows how even targeted policies can disrupt an entire state. Number 7, Wisconsin, America's dairyland. Dairy is king here, and tariffs from Mexico and China hit cheese and whey exports hard. Mexico targeted American cheese, devastating a market Wisconsin had spent years building. China's tariffs on dairy products, including whey, added to the pain. Already struggling with low milk prices, many family farms faced financial ruin. Wisconsin's manufacturing sector, including Harley-Davidson, was also caught in the crossfire, hit by both EU tariffs and higher steel costs. The result: a perfect storm for the state's signature industries. For Wisconsin, tariffs weren't abstract, they were a direct assault on its economic identity. The struggles of farmers and manufacturers became national symbols of the trade war's unintended consequences. Let's head to Ohio. Number 6, Ohio, a state with deep roots in both manufacturing and agriculture. Tariffs on steel and aluminum were meant to help, but for Ohio's vast auto industry, they raised costs and hurt competitiveness. Auto manufacturers faced higher prices for materials, making cars more expensive and threatening jobs. The threat of more tariffs on imported cars and parts created uncertainty, stalling investment and hiring. On the farm side, Ohio's soybean growers lost their top export market, China, when retaliatory tariffs hit. Prices collapsed and rural communities felt the strain. The trade war left Ohio caught between old promises and new realities. Instead of renewed prosperity, workers and farmers faced fresh anxiety. Tariffs meant to help one sector ended up hurting another. Now let's look at Iowa. Number 5. Iowa. Ground zero for the soybean shock. Iowa is a top soybean producer, and before the trade war, China bought a third of its crop. When China retaliated, the market vanished, prices plummeted, and futures markets went haywire. Many farmers couldn't cover their costs, losing billions in revenue. Federal aid helped, but it was a band-aid on a gaping wound. The pain spread beyond farms. Local businesses, equipment dealers, and restaurants all suffered. The health of rural Iowa is tied to its farms, and the tariffs created a domino effect. Iowa's dependence on a single export market became a vulnerability. The trade war forced a painful reckoning for the state's economy. For Iowa's farmers, global politics became a personal crisis. Next up, Illinois. Number 4. Illinois, where both agriculture and manufacturing took a hit. Like Iowa, Illinois is a top soybean producer, and the loss of the Chinese market was devastating. Pork producers were also hammered by tariffs from China and Mexico, creating a brutal 1-2 punch. Family farms faced failure and federal aid couldn't fill the gap. Meanwhile, Illinois' manufacturing giants like Caterpillar faced higher steel costs and retaliatory tariffs on their exports. The state's unique position as both a Farm Belt leader and industrial powerhouse made it especially vulnerable. Farmers and factory workers alike faced profound uncertainty. The tariffs created a crisis on multiple fronts. Illinois' double whammy puts it high on our list. The pain was felt from rural fields to Chicago's factories. Now let's head to Michigan. Number 3. Michigan, home of the American auto industry. Tariffs on steel and aluminum hit automakers hard, raising costs by hundreds of millions. The big three, Ford, GM and Chrysler, faced less money for innovation and more pressure on pricing. Retaliatory threats from Europe and tariffs on auto parts created global supply chain chaos. Automakers rely on long-term planning, but the trade war made the future unpredictable. Investment and hiring stalled as uncertainty grew. For Michigan, this was a systemic shock to its most important industry. The ripple effects threatened jobs and economic growth statewide. Tariffs meant to protect ended up destabilizing the industry's foundation. Let's move west to California. Number 2. California, the nation's largest and most globally connected economy. California's agriculture, almonds, walnuts, pistachios, wine, relied on exports to China, which dried up under tariffs. The state's tech industry, centered in Silicon Valley, faced higher costs and supply chain headaches as tariffs hit Chinese imports. Companies scrambled to adapt, rethinking production and sourcing. The ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, America's busiest, saw chaos as trade flows surged and stalled. Shipping, trucking, and logistics networks were thrown into turmoil. The tariffs created volatility across California's economic engines, from farms to tech labs to ports. No single industry was spared. The impact was broad and deep. California's global exposure made it uniquely vulnerable. The financial and logistical fallout touched nearly every corner of the state. Now, the state hit hardest: Texas, the Lone Star State's triple threat. Number 1. Texas, the epicenter of the trade war's impact. Texas's diverse economy, energy, agriculture, manufacturing, became a source of vulnerability. Energy exports to China, especially oil and natural gas, were halted by tariffs, risking billions in revenue. Agriculture suffered as China targeted cotton, sorghum, beef, and pecans, key Texan exports. Prices dropped, and farmers faced huge losses. Texas's manufacturing and tech sectors, especially in Austin and Dallas, were hit by higher steel costs and retaliatory tariffs. As America's top exporting state, Texas saw its products become less competitive worldwide. The triple threat to energy, agriculture, and manufacturing made Texas number 1 for tariff pain. No other state had so many core industries targeted at once. The financial losses were staggering, running into the billions. From oil fields to cotton farms to factories, the pain was deep and lasting. Texas stands as the state most reshaped by the trade war. Let's tally up the lessons. From Texas oil fields to Wisconsin dairy farms, the trade war's impact was real and painful. Tariffs meant to protect American industry triggered a cascade of retaliation, hurting workers, farmers, and businesses. The modern economy is deeply interconnected. A tariff in one state can spark crisis in another. The costs weren't spread evenly, they hit hardest in America's industrial and agricultural heartland. The story isn't over, and the lessons are ongoing. How has your community been affected? Share your story in the comments. For more deep dives, subscribe to Discover US, and thanks for watching.